Welcome, guys, to the Alpha Coach podcast. Today, I have a very special friend and a guest. His name is Arjun Anjaria. Okay. Now, I'm going to go a little bit into his backstory and tell you how and what he started and why it actually became something that it is today. Right. Now, most of us actually read labels on protein jars, on supplement bottles, and always assume that what's really printed there is probably true. Right. I mean, why would we not believe it? But what actually would happen if they were not really as true as they claim? Right. And that is the question that Arjun asked once and probably thought about it aloud and said, let me check. I mean, what's going to go wrong? Right. So he didn't set out to build what we would call like a health tech startup, but he just literally wanted to check up and fix his own vitamin deficiencies. Because even after following what his doctor gave, all the prescriptions, the prescribed supplements, etc., all the standard supplements really didn't work on him, and he started to wonder as to what might be the reason. Like, this curiosity eventually turned into an investigation, and he started deeper checking, and even once actually got some really popular products tested in a lab. And then what he found out was like super shocking, that there were so many supplements out there, so many products that we blindly believe are mislabeled. There are inflated claims, and some even have some toxic ingredients, right? Shocking. So, this is where we start thinking about why don't we get Arjun on this podcast and figuring out why and how his journey happened, right? Now, this obviously started something in his mind, right? That personal journey really sparked what we call his company today, which is called Unbox Health. They do third party ratings for companies, and for rather for products. And they're fast becoming, and we've got like 60,000 online followers. They've got 3.5 lakh people who actually use the platform. They've tested over 300 products. And they're fast literally becoming what I would call as the trust layer between us and the product company so that we get better options. We understand these things better. We make better choices in life because what we consume is eventually what we become, right? So their entire thing is to how can we create a transparency layer in the ecosystem, and how can everybody work towards making, I would say, India healthy? Brands should start representing better, they should start doing better, and consumers need to be a little bit more educated and make more informed choices. I think that's really what Arjun is trying to solve for. So Arjun not really trying to be a hero. What he simply wants is to be someone who can explain what food labels mean, what do they say, how much can we trust them, and just give somebody something that they can say, you know what, if this is a rating, then I can blindly trust and consume it without being impacted or without having to do any guesswork in our own head, right? So today, what we want to do is understand Arjun's journey, understand the brand's journey. What is the mindset? What's the mission? What's the momentum behind all of it? And therefore, what could it mean for the future of all of our health in India? Welcome, Arjun, to the podcast.
Hey, thanks a lot, Ketan. Thanks for having me. Excited to be doing this with you. And thanks for the warm introduction.
Super, super. Tell me, Arjun, exactly what happened with your health that made you actually start questioning these supplement labels?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think it all started for me towards the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think early 2022, when things were slowly starting to get back to normal. I feel like the pandemic sort of took a big toll on my health and my body. I was working extremely long hours, wasn't really prioritizing my own health, wasn't very active, felt pretty burnt out both professionally and personally. And so decided to take a bit of a sabbatical and focus on my own health, right? And in that process, I was obviously consuming a lot of health content, taking some courses online to sort of understand these things at a much deeper level, understand sort of nutrition more deeply, my biochemistry, etc., running a bunch of blood tests. And one of the things that I discovered was my deficiencies in terms of my vitamin D levels, my B12 levels, among several other things, right? But these were the two things that sort of stood out, very common, typically found in more than 50% of Indians. So it's wasn't something out of the ordinary, but something I was trying to tackle. And one of the most common things that people recommend in these scenarios is to get on to some sort of form of supplementation, right? So like any consumer, I went on Amazon, Flipkart, and ended up trying a couple of sort of top rated products, what seemed like thousands of reviews, very good user ratings. Started working with these products to, I think, consume them for a couple of months, assumed they would have some benefits on my body. Went back, did another blood test, and realized that my serum levels were just flat, right? Like nothing was moving. Tried a couple of these products, actually, different brands, um, and became increasingly more skeptical about sort of what was actually in these, right? Like the thing with the food industry is that unlike other verticals, especially a lot of the things that we buy online, right? There's very little feedback loops. You can't really see the product. You can't really touch and feel it and be able
Yeah.
to really experience if it's delivering, right? You just pop it in your mouth and hope that it's going to do what you expect it to do. And so I started working with some food labs just out of curiosity to understand what's in some of these products, right? And was very shocked to find some of the things that we found in these preliminary lab tests that I was working with food labs to do. I mean, top ranked vitamins in these categories were failing basic label accuracy tests, claiming certain milligrams of vitamin D3 and contained almost no vitamin D3, and sort of existed across the board, right? It wasn't just one brand across sort of multiple brands, which got me really skeptical and sort of down this path. Long story short, we ended up building Unbox Health as a platform to solve for this exact trust problem.
I mean, I was going to ask you, like, how does one in food products even know whether it's working unless you test yourself after a certain amount of time, having been completely consistent? That's where the entire black box exists, right? Like if I were to start taking D3, I would have to start taking D3 on a very consistent, regular basis. And then after a few months, have to retest myself for my D3 levels. And those are things that are difficult to do unless the doctor has mandated you to do it. Like I haven't tested my levels in probably 2 years, you know. So that's something that it was a good thing that you start thinking about this in a few months itself, but I guess you were already testing yourself, which is why you said, "Oh, I think I need to take some action and figure out why this is not working for me."
Right. Yeah. I think it was purely by chance, right? Because I was running a lot of these sort of experiments and trying different protocols on my body. And so that required me to test more frequently. And so just realized that some of these protocols just weren't helping in the way that they were supposed to. And like you said, I mean, food is just so unique as a category, right? There are just
Yeah.
almost no feedback loops. You just when you buy, say, furniture or you buy a book or whatever, right? You can instantly validate based on your taste, preference, whatever it might be, that this was a good consumer experience and that this served the purpose that I chose the product for, right? You ingest, even with skincare to some extent, you can still visually see changes in many cases or be able to like understand if the product is achieving the results it was intended to. But with food and supplements, it's just goes into your body and then it does whatever it needs to do at a cellular level, and
And
you just hope that
everybody
it.
claims they've got the best ingredients. Like for example, I take at least four or five, these things. I take my zinc, I take magnesium. Obviously, I have creatine. Obviously, I have whey protein. Obviously, have some electrolytes and and stuff like that. But like you rightly said, you look at the top rated. You look at something that's sort of in your budget range is what you do. Or for D3 and stuff like that, just go to the medical store and say we are D3. That's one of the brands that probably pays him the best commission is what he sort of passes on to you, right? There's no literally telling one brand from the other at all in this. So any initial thoughts from your friends or the family when you start lab testing these products on your own, or like what are the first reactions?
Yeah, yeah. It was, well, I think initially when I told some friends and family about this, like a curiosity project that I was running on the side, I think everyone was very confused by what I was doing, right? Because I that's not the background I come from. I come from a tech background, worked at sort of in the startup industry for most of my career, and here I was like working with food labs, putting products in sample Ziploc bags and sending them out like some like mad
Yeah.
scientist in a basement. So it was initially a lot of sort of confusion with what I was really doing. Right? And I think then when we started to sort of see some results in terms of like some of the data coming out of these labs, I think a lot of folks were instantly just, I guess, shocked and confused, right? I think, because a lot of people care about what they're putting in their bodies and just want to be health conscious. But I think broadly, I think everyone's also just a value conscious consumer, right? It doesn't, even if you're worth many billions of dollars, you still, if you're paying for a product that costs 100 rupees, it better contain that thing, right? Because as a consumer, we don't like being lied to, no matter how much
Yeah,
disposable income
exactly.
we
It's
have, no matter
it's
how small the ticket size is, right?
it's just a simple
And so I think.
expectation management, right? I mean, if you're saying that this costs 100 and this value of 100, I want 100. Don't give me 90. I'm not expecting 1,000, but give me worth 100 or whatever that value that you're claiming. Spot on over there. Yeah.
Or in many cases, it's zero, right? Like you're paying for a particular product. Let's say, for instance, plant-based omega-3 supplements is a category that we've tested. several, because we have a lot of vegetarians in
Hmm.
India that don't like consuming fish oil. So they rely on plant-based categories, plant-based omega-3. And most of the plant-based
Yeah.
products we've tested contain almost no omega-3. So you're paying for expensive product that should be containing omega-3 fatty acids, and it probably contains just some like vegetable oil or God knows what, right? And so it's not even a case of like getting partially cheated. You're just, as a consumer, you're getting a completely different product for the one that you're actually paying for.
And you chose, I think, what, protein powders and I think peanut butters were your first test subjects, right? Your products that you tested.
I think we launched with about 6 to 8 categories, so sort of very mainstream, generic categories. We initially, I mean, today we're in sort of a much broader space. We're doing all kinds of packaged foods and sort of anything that enters your kitchen, right? Your ice creams, chips, etc. But in the early days, we wanted to focus on the supplement industry and specifically some of the like mainstream supplements. So your, like you said, your proteins or magnesium supplements,
And
some of your
butters
like
and stuff.
vitamin Ds, B12, etc., which are
Okay.
very commonly consumed and also sort of very relatable for health conscious individuals, because that was the initial sort of push.
So Arjun, tell me, what kind of a team have you built and what sort of expertise do you need in-house to build a brand that does exactly this?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for us, obviously, the core of everything we do is lab testing. So we have in-house team of lab testing experts. So folks, a combination of people that work within our team and also consultants that we work with externally. I think that's the core of what we do, right? Is being able to effectively and accurately be able to assess products. And so lab testing is a big part of what we do. So in addition to that, content is something that we also spend a lot of time doing. So we have content in house. So we have platforms like Instagram, etc., that we invest a lot of our time and effort of uh, sort of making content for putting ourselves out there. Besides that, we have tech and products, so the platform that needs to get built.
Right.
And then we have folks internally helping with operations and other roles, right? So a pretty lean team. We have 6 full-time members and then a few freelancers here and there that
Nice.
help with miscellaneous
Nice.
things.
And do you work with multiple testing facilities or there's like one testing facility that you generally use? Or do you do a mix of the same testing across, rather the product, same product tested across two, three? How does the exact process work?
Yeah, so in fact, every product we rate gets evaluated at up to 3 different labs. So we
Okay.
never rely on just a single lab. One of the things we learned sort of early on in the journey is that the same product, let's say, sent out to 2 different labs will not always give you consistent results. We have a partner network of about 6 to 7 labs that we sort of work with on an ongoing basis. So we've talked to dozens of labs in the country and try to figure out which labs can reliably be our partners, right? And unfortunately, in the lab testing world, there's just a lot of deviation and a lot of labs that you just cannot really. We figured we could not really work with because they were not able to give us repeatable, reliable results, right?
Got it.
We've
Yeah.
had instances where we would send the same product to the same lab, just split it into 2 separate samples, and they'd come up with vastly different results. So
Oh,
all
wow.
sorts of issues like that where
I was actually going to ask you whether, you send the exact same batch of a certain product to the different labs or because different batches also could have, different things. But if you're saying you literally got the same batch, split it into two, given it to the same lab, how stringent or how detailed is this process of testing? And is there one universally accepted way to test these things, or do different labs have slightly different methods which could give you variation? It's like cash flow projections, right? Business valuations. Every person who's trying to value a business will have some different, even though formulae are pretty much the same, but there are assumptions, are the way you apply those formulae, the number of years you want to predict ahead, and so on and so forth, that is then put on that individual. So similarly, do labs also have that little, wiggle room in them, or is it a very, very simple, straightforward process?
yeah, so I think it's actually very standardized, right? For any parameter that you test, there's typically uh, clearly standardized processes and protocols defined by US Pharmacopoeia, which is sort of the global standard. And then we have NABL standards that govern a lot of the lab testing that happens in India. FSSAI, specifically in the food space, also has their own set of standards, right? So in terms of like how labs are required to test, there's a fair amount of standardization there. It's just that across, there's still humans involved in the process, right? And so that's where a lot of the deviation comes in. There's a sample processing step, then a testing step. And so there's different parts in the process where sort of errors can creep in. But in terms of the actual protocol and methodologies used in testing, it's very standardized.
And how long is this process? So if you decide that, okay, I'm going to test this particular product for what the label actually says, how long does it take from there to actually getting a rating and be published on your website?
It typically takes us anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks. We always buy the product ourselves, so we don't reach out to the brand to send us a sample of the product. So really replicating the consumer experience.
Right.
So we buy the product ourselves. So typically there might be some delays in delivery times, etc. We then send it out to two labs initially. And then for values that don't converge from those results from the two labs, we then send those parameters out to a third lab. And so we have
Got it.
a sort of convergence algorithm that we apply internally. And so end to end, it usually takes us about 2 to 3 weeks to go from buying the product to having ratings for the product.
Okay, and by convergence for the layman, it's simply like, I mean, for somebody who understands some mean or a median or a weighted average of sorts, where you say, okay, these three are slightly different scores. To unify them, you give them one final score, right? Okay, got it. Got it. Got it. So,
Correct. So we always typically we would have when we send a product out to two labs, we'll come back with lab A will say X and lab B will say Y. And as long as X and Y are within certain bounds, we can say that these are reliable
mhm,
results. When they fall outside of diverging from each other beyond a certain limit, that's when we say we need to get a third lab involved. And then we have sort of a criteria that we use to identify what is the most accurate representation for this parameter.
understood. Understood. And it's a good thing that you said that you buy these products yourself, right? Because obviously there's an independence factor or a conflict that you want to ensure that does not happen. So that the brand is actually not asking you to do this. But do you have both models available? Do you actually do brands reach out to you for testing, or they just get it tested themselves, or you are a purely independent training platform which has nothing to do with brands, good or bad? You're not actually calling brands out publicly, but you're saying, listen, I'm just going to test. I am a consumer at the end of the day, and I'm building a trust layer, and I'm just going to do this on my own. So, do both the models work, or is it just one side where you say, I'm going to do it on my own?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point, right? Because we talked about the trust issue on the consumer side, but brands also struggle with the same issue, right? Today, if you're a good brand doing the right thing, building a high quality product, you have very few ways in the industry to actually prove that you have a high quality product, right? I mean, it's largely just a game of marketing budgets. Whoever has the deepest
Yeah,
pockets can outspend the competition, rank on top, bring on the most influential influencers and sort of just play that game. I mean, we've all seen ads on Instagram and other platforms, right? And so we essentially support both models. There's two ways that products can get rated on our platform. One is we constantly get requests from our community of users. So we have 4 lakh plus users that are constantly requesting products, and the most requested, most popular products in the category we would rate at our own cost, where the brand is not involved. And the second is brands also have the ability to use our rating services and get their products rated at a fee. In both processes, the we follow the same identical steps. We buy the product ourselves. We get it tested at multiple labs. We apply our rating methodology because there's lakhs of brands in the industry, right? So it's impossible for us to rate every single brand.
absolutely.
And so we enable both consumers to benefit from this, but also brands that are doing the right thing to be able to build credibility.
Also, do these ratings stand for life, or are they required to be done, or do you think it's a best practice versus law or requirement to be tested on a periodic basis, say once a year, once in 3 years? Is there any such thing as that?
So we have a validity on every rating that's on the platform, and it's a 12-month
Okay,
validity. So ratings expire at the end of 12 months. So if you go to any rating on our platform, you'll see when the rating went live, when it expires, which batch number was used to test, where the product was purchased from. So sort of try to create a lot of clarity there in terms of being transparent about when the rating expires and so on.
perfect. So tell me, I mean, you've obviously now you've got 4 lakh users, right? Just in the last 1 year, I think you guys have seen a serious upward shift in terms of how many products you've tested, what's the interest in all of this.
Being
I think what we've actually seen in the last 4, 5 years, right, since COVID, is that there's been a huge shift from not wanting to have, say, a comorbidity to saying, let me use preventive health and actually get fitter, stronger, healthier. Let me start focusing a little bit. People took a lot of stuff, at home fitness, joint gyms, realized that, you know what, they really need to start taking care of health. And then, they started consuming what you guys actually test, right? Supplements, fitness products, peanut butter, whatever, etc., etc. Everything that they believed can get them fit. But suddenly what's happening is on the other side, brands also saw a huge surge in their sales. These guys started, the demand increased, supply increased, all that. And then suddenly Unbox Health comes in between and said, listen, guys, hold up, hold up, hold up. Why don't you check what you're actually eating? Right? So, like I said, threw a cat amongst the chickens. Now, one side, of course, consumers are saying, oh, okay, let us now check. But then are also brands who invest a lot towards how they actually develop the product. What are the ingredients they're putting in? Are they adapting or are they giving them what they're saying on the bottles or, products? And how have you come in and what are the changes you're seeing on the brand side now because of all of this?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, right? I think there's, I guess, two very distinct camps even among food and supplement brands, right? There's brands that are like doing the right thing, have their sort of heart in the right place, care about consumer health more broadly, and then there's brands that maybe just view it as an opportunity to make money, right? Just purely as a business. Not saying one is better than the other, right? And I guess two ends of the spectrum, and then everyone falls somewhere in between that. It's generally very easy from having a conversation with a founder in this space within the first few minutes to assess sort of where they fall on that
Yeah,
spectrum, right? Like how deeply do they really care about the health of the consumer, or how closely are they just thinking, or how deeply do they think about this as just a quote unquote dhanda, right? Yeah, I think what we're saying is there's a large percentage of brands that probably just don't care about what we're doing, right? Or at least today don't view credibility building as a big part of their day to day, right? I think they're there to merchandise their product, to position it in the right place, to get it to rank high on platforms, to sort of just essentially focus largely on playing the
right.
marketing game, right? And building credibility today isn't a big part of their strategy. But what we're slowly starting to see is that increasingly more number of brands are finding out about us, finding out about the value that we're creating for consumers, and the fact that consumers are now starting to pay attention to some of these things. And so I think we are seeing that shift. It's still only like year one for us, right? So we haven't like revolution.
Right? I mean, if you think about the two camps that you spoke, maybe I would say three. Okay. One is too big already, or they're just too big to care. Right. So for them, you exist or don't exist. They don't care, to be very honest. They've always done the way things have been done and they will continue doing that. Then there are two camps. One is who's like, okay, these guys are doing something that we've been talking about. This is literally a claim to fame. This is what we're trying to say on the label. This is our content trying to educate the customer. And for the other guys who are probably, not the best quality. I'm not saying they're blatant liars, but not the best quality. They've just got money, they've raised some money, or they've got their own money, they're marketing and just trying to make money off the consumer without giving them the best quality products. Let's just say that they would just find you as an irritant, maybe, and try to rubbish claims or try to sweep them under the carpet, right? So those are the two main categories for you. Is it that, I mean, we spoke about the fact that they're not 100% true, right? Maybe they're not as great as they claim to be. But there are also what we had spoken about offline was there are mislabeled products. There are toxic ingredients in those products. Is it that consumers let go or forget, like don't really care that much, or is there a regulatory issue or the fact that those regulations exist but they are not enforced properly? Where do you see the issue here, the gap?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the regulations that exist, we already have fairly robust, competent regulations in place. I think it's sort of fashionable to blame FSSAI, which is the regulator in this space, for everything that's wrong in the industry. But I think they've done a fairly decent job of catching up with global standards in many cases and defining good regulations. It's borderline impossible for them to be
Mhm.
able to really enforce, right? If you look at the sheer volume of companies in the industry, the number of manufacturers, the number of brands that have marketing licenses, I mean, it goes into the many, many lakhs, right? So I think enforcement is a bit of a challenge. They do some sort of random sampling and checking and look for ways to be able to identify issues in the industry. But I think it's very difficult for them to do this at scale, right? And this is not just a problem that FSSAI in India has. FDA in the US struggles with the same issue of like, how do you find that balance between regulating
Yeah,
while
growth.
also
Yeah,
not
I mean, I think the
stifling economic growth, right?
number of new brands that crop up every month must be more than the entire workforce of the FSSAI, right? I mean, there's no way these guys can even keep up.
I don't think this is a problem that can only be solved by government. If you look at the financial industry, some of the same issues have existed with credit ratings, for instance, right? So in the financial industry, for instance, you have SEBI, which is the regulator, but it's almost impossible for SEBI to be able to monitor all of these companies and all of the financial health of all
Right.
of these companies at scale. And so what they've introduced is this concept of rating agencies like
Mhm.
CRISIL, S&P, etc., that do some of the heavy lifting. So there's clear guidelines in terms of like the role that these rating agencies play, and they sort of in conjunction with SEBI, the regulator, help create more trust in the industry. And we believe that the same solutions or some of the same frameworks can be applied to food. And so that's something that we're already in conversations with
So cool.
FSSAI
So
to
cool.
put
Actually, I
into
was going to
place.
ask you that, right? Like tomorrow, what if you were to be given charge of some regulation, like you said, like a care ratings or a crystal ratings, and you guys become that? What is the one big thing that you'd want to change? But anyways, you already spoke about that, so that's perfect, perfect. Now, going back to, taking a few steps back, right? Like your personal thing. Now, you could have just obviously fixed your own problem. You did a few tests, you found out, figured out what's there, right? Like, what motivated you to create this and say, oh, could be a business. This could be actually an actual platform that could help people. And why go so deep and go so much into this? Was there something else as a driving force behind? I mean, just curious.
Yeah, initially it was just sort of discovering the problem, right? When I was sort of working with food labs to randomly test a few products that I was consuming, that my family was consuming. I think, and I guess the more we tested, the more we evaluated this space, the more obvious the problem became. So I don't think there was like one moment where it all came together and said that we must build Unbox, right? Sort of very organically, one thing after the other, sort of in this journey, I spent a couple of weeks calling to really understanding sort of how the industry works, right? So I would get in touch with contract manufacturers pretending to be
Oh,
a brand and sort of understand the process from the lens of a brand, right? So I would make up random names of like, this is what my idea is, this is what my company wants to do. I'm looking for, send them RFQs and try to understand sort of how the sort of entire model of building food products and supplement products in India works, right? And it's shockingly easy. Like you can go from just an idea to being live on Amazon and Flipkart and all these platforms in the matter of like a couple of weeks. There's the same entity will help you with your formulation, your licensing, your
wow.
packaging, your branding, your distribution, warehousing.
So,
Like it's incredible what these manufacturing houses have been able to build. And I guess credit to them for being able to sort of build this one-stop solution for food brands. But on the other hand, it's also from a consumer lens, it's very concerning to see how easy it is to actually launch a brand in the industry, right? And so typically when you talk to some of these contract manufacturers, they'll give you a menu of offerings, right? So if you're asking for,
right.
say, a multivitamin, they will give you, let's say, four different offerings at different price points at varying levels
Oh,
of
yeah.
quality, right? And so you decide as a brand based on the point that you're entering at what makes sense for you and sort of where you
It's
draw
like
the
going to
line of like
buy rice
quality
from the
versus
market,
price. And
right?
so
You
in
have the
most cases,
highest packaged basmati to the regular basmati to the tukda rice as it's called and the lower quality rice. And then you decide what you want to eat. What kind of biryani are you going to make? It's literally that. I mean, it's unreal to think about supplements like that. No, I mean, I wouldn't have thought that they actually give you like a menu that you choose based on your entry point. Because if I don't know, a copper chimney were to be doing it, they'd want the highest quality biryani. But if the neighborhood restaurant that serves biryani might choose the slightly cheaper variant, no? And that's something that actually misses, most people miss. I actually didn't think about it. But then how does one decide? Like the only way then is to look at Unbox. At this point of time, is the only way for me as a consumer. Whether building something damn cool. I think if one were to ask you as to what's stopping you from being not just 4 lakh users, but 4 crore, is you just need to be known because it's just an obvious choice after that. I mean, there's nothing else, right? Have you ever had to deal with any sort of a pushback from any large brand or startup founders? Anything interesting that happened, good or bad? Bad, obviously, if there's a pushback or they sort of really got alarmed and started throwing legal notices at you, which we've seen with other people who've tried to do something similar. Have you also got any sort of crazy stories or at least one crazy story from anything, good or bad? You don't need to name the brand. We don't want to call out anyone.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think we get our fair share of sort of questions and criticisms from brands in terms of like some of the things that we're doing. What we've been very clear about is like we don't sit shaming brands, we don't make videos against brands or put out content for or against brands, right? So we really think of ourselves as a neutral data
Yeah.
intelligence company. We're not a content company, right? We're not here to shame brands. We're not here to say good, bad. Everything we do is sort of just a translation of lab tests and lab results that come out of our internal processes, right? So that's been something. So we also sort of, from a legal perspective, we're very clear about sort of how we frame our ratings and the way we position our ratings. That being said, yeah, we do get a lot of questions and we get brands approaching us questioning the validity of our ratings. Generally have all of our lab tests are publicly available so anybody can access the information. So it's not really like a there's nothing to hide, right? So we're sort of a very open and transparent platform. And we're not labeling brands as good, bad, unethical, corrupt, or any of those sort of we're not putting out content shaming brands.
You're not taking sides. You're not
Yeah.
against them. You're not trying to call people out and make them feel bad. But you're saying, listen, the truth's the truth. At the end of the day, you said this, something else came out. Deal with it. Make yourselves better. I think that's the only thing. And for consumers, you're just trying to say, listen, guys, we just have to know what's happening behind the brand. And there are other motivations at play, right? You're not their only, not everybody may have your health at
Yeah.
the top, number one priority. A lot of people think of it as business, which is fine as long as they just, like, if you say that a brand contains three good ingredients and not seven, and if they're providing those three, it's fine. Right. And that's why I said back earlier in the conversation, that's all expectation management. At the end of the day, everything's just that. People just feel cheated if they don't get what they believe they're paying for. That's it. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. To add to that, right, we also have a very open challenge process that any
nice.
brand can initiate. So if a brand disagrees with our lab testing or our findings, there's a way for them to transparently challenge our rating, right? Where they would pay a challenge fee and then have the product re-rated, where we'd follow the same process again. So in general, we sort of always stand by our ratings because we
Yeah.
rely on multiple labs and have a very robust process. But we do offer the brand the ability to request a re-rating if they feel like there's maybe something wrong in the way we have tested a product or something in our testing process didn't align with what they think
Like,
should be done. Interestingly, also we've also had many brands that have, and this is sort of a positive
right.
spin on the work that we're doing, right? We've seen many, and some of these are very large FMCG brands that have discovered issues in their products, reached out to us, had a conversation with us, and have committed to then making changes in their
How
formulations
cool.
or their supply chain
How cool. See, now
and their process,
that's where the big impact comes in,
which is
right? You're actually getting people to say, listen, we agree. We didn't take a look at it back then. Somebody's told us, somebody showed us the mirror, whatever you call it. But somebody's pointed out, listen, guys, there's an error in this. Why don't you change this? And they've actually made change. And that's where the larger people, actual consumers benefit because now the big brand is saying, I'll change that. That's so cool.
that's our goal here, right? I mean, today, if let's say uh, 40% of or 60% of all products in the market are of a
Uh-huh.
substandard quality, can we over the next few years bring that number down to say 30% or even lower, right? We're not here to like destroy brands or take them down or make sensationalist
Yeah.
content about brands, right? We just want to help enable better consumption and sort of slowly help brands also transition to
Yeah, and
building
that's
better
the right way
products.
to do it. I mean,
And
when you
so
hear people about reinventing the industry, disrupting an industry, and blah 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 blah. I mean, you're just trying to literally call attention to yourself versus just doing the small changes, telling people, finding what's wrong, advising others, informing others, educating some, and so on and so forth. So I think that's a very good way to do it, and it's actually pleasant when somebody goes to your Instagram. Also, it's more educational. It's eye-opening for a lot of people, especially when I was just taking a look at, oh, this one's also there. Now you guys are doing so many more categories. So literally everything we consume in a day could eventually come under your brand. So it's a good thing that people just have access to that information. Coming to that, what kind of like feedback or stories that you would have got from certain users? Anything that materially, like this was a brand story that you gave where they actually said, oh, we're going to change our ingredients or something, the composition, right? On the user side, you've got a 4 lakh plus user community. How have you impacted their day to day? Like how you impacted their decision making? Or are there any interesting stories that made a deep impact on someone?
Yeah, I mean, we get, I think now that we've hit a little bit of scale, we are seeing, I mean, every week we get dozens of messages on whether it's social media, through our contact email, comments in our content, whatever it might be, talking about how Unbox Health is positively influencing consumers, right? So we have an internal user love channel where we constantly post screenshots about these things in our
Yeah.
internal Slack that we use to communicate, right? But I think the more interesting and exciting thing for us is getting these kinds of testimonials and messages from health professionals because they are able to impact people at a much larger scale, right? I mean, we constantly get messages from nutritionists, functional medicine doctors, gym trainers, health coaches talking about how they are able to use our ratings to then recommend products to their clients.
So, I mean, how could our coaches eventually use Unbox? Because we built our platform around coaches. So we have users, you have academies, we're doing stuff with Unbox with you guys, we're doing multiple things. Everything comes centered around the coach. Because whey protein, kaun sa khana hai, they'll ask us. If they're already using it, how and what are they exactly doing with the Unbox rating? Like, how are they using it exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think just like consumers, health professionals are also largely blind, right? When it comes to assessing product quality, like nobody has X-ray vision where they can just look at a product and be able to assess that it's actually contains what it claims, it's safe to consume, and it's sort of healthy. So I think what we're seeing is, yeah, a lot of these coaches, health professionals who have dozens, in some cases, hundreds of clients that they work with are now using Unbox Health ratings to then inform their recommendations, right? We're also seeing a lot of content creators put out content about, hey, these are the best brands in this category in India, use this. A lot of that was originally typically been based on their instincts, or in some cases, they might have commercial interests where
Yep.
a brand is paying them to make that. But in the case of like an organic piece of content, we've seen multiple creators now make content based on Unbox Health ratings, right? So they did a piece. We've seen videos of creators talking about the best omega-3 supplements in India, for instance, and they'll rely on Unbox Health ratings to make
How
that
cool.
content because that informs their selection process. So
So cool.
I think from an ecosystem perspective, yeah, we really want to be able to work with health professionals because ultimately they are the ones getting these questions on a very regular basis, right? And yeah, I'm sure your coaches must will attest to that. I mean, they're constantly getting asked questions about like, कौन सा supplement लेना चाहिए? What is a good brand? Which one should I choose in this category?
Like people who've been training for years, people who've been supplementing for years, still wonder as to what's a good brand because there's so many that are coming out every other week, every other month, but they have no idea of knowing. Yeah, so I used to also make the same kind of decision making, I mean, look at reviews, get what's there, try it out, maybe change the brand, figure out, etc., etc. But now I think more and more I've been thinking about which brands are there, what are they actually trying to say, what content they're making. And then now another layer of that comes into play wherein, I've actually gone and checked, okay, does Unbox actually say these guys are good? Or, what does their final score say and stuff like that? And made my last couple of decisions based on that and said, okay, I'm making the right decisions. So tell me, globally, do such agencies like yours exist? And how big can this be? Because, this is just the start, literally, right? What is the scope for this over the next 5, 10 years? Like, where are you looking to take this? Ambitious.
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of examples of companies in the US and in the UK that are doing similar things to what we do. I don't think it's a exact one-to-one relationship. I think we sort of, in terms of the process and the way how our ratings work and how we do things, I think there's some uniqueness in terms of their approach and our approach. But yeah, so there are sort of incumbents in this space that have been able to build successfully in these other geographies, and so it's not unique to some of those markets, but certainly unique to the Indian market. In terms of like where we see this scaling, I think there's opportunities to go obviously geographically expand beyond just India, right? So anywhere where you typically have highly capitalist societies with significant trust deficit and limited enforcement of regulations.
I was literally talking about like a moonshot vision, right? Like for Unbox for you. Like, what's that thing that you want to see? I mean, that even your team might think is crazy, right? I can imagine friends, family, so anyways think founders are like a little, eccentric anyway. But I'm saying even within your team, what's that one thing you'd love for an Unbox to go? Where would you like to see it?
Yeah, so we talk about ourselves as the trust and credibility layer, right, for all things in this industry. But that means also being able to make these insights available wherever consumers are making choices. And so that's sort of our push for at least the next few years, is to integrate with marketplaces, to be wherever consumers are buying, right? When I started out Unbox Health, I was misled by some reviews and products that I saw on Amazon. It would be amazing if in the next couple of years we're integrated into Amazon's backend so that our insights are now powering the decision making process for consumers. So I think beyond that, I think we want to get into a bunch of different categories, things like personal care, skincare, cosmetics, where some of the same issues exist, right? Consumers don't really know what they're paying for, and we can validate the quality of products using unbiased lab testing.
Yeah, but they,
And I think sort of beyond the rating space, there's a bunch of ideas that we have in consumer health, but I think a lot of those are still uh, sort of ideas and things that we're thinking through. But there is an ambition to go beyond just the rating space that we're in today.
oh, that's fantastic. I mean, if you're thinking about going beyond ratings, you're thinking about going beyond what people consume, like internally, and also now you're talking about makeup and cosmetics and other stuff which people apply outside on the skin. Then it suddenly opens up a huge new market, right? And like you rightly said, there are mislabeled products, ingredients that are not good, and effectively things that are good or bad for you, which regardless of what the claim may be in their marketing, everything needs to have a trust layer at the end of the day. Right? I mean, there are good brands even in like we have in food and supplements. We also have good brands in the makeup and the creams and the cosmetics industry, so to speak, and they're trying to do the right job versus the large conglomerate incumbents that have already been always been there. And then you guys can come and become like that one company who I would say deals in a trust layer and creates that across industries. If that can be there, then it's not just Inbox Health, but it could be Unbox everything. That can be just across industries and multiple other platforms, right? So tell me now, I mean, just to wrap up, like, what do your family and friends do now? Do they still think you're crazy? And do they still buy stuff without checking, or the first port of call is now to go to Unbox?
Yeah, well, I'd hope a lot of my friends and family are at least relying on Unbox Health to make choices. I don't think they think it's as crazy of an idea or as skeptical about the work that we're doing as they were when I initially was exploring this, right? For a long
Right.
time also, as we were building the product and we didn't really know what it's going to exactly look like, it was really hard to explain to people what we're building, right? So now it's a little more structured and tangible. And so I think most people, when we talk about the work we're doing, get it pretty quickly, because at some point in their consumption journey, they've also dealt with this trust issue, right? And I think that's one of the nice things about uh, sort of getting validation as we're building, is hearing from people that what we're doing is adding value to their consumption journey, helps us sort of go to work every day knowing that we're on the right track and we're moving in the right direction.
It's like that story of the mason, no, where a person crossing, the guy is building something. He's got bricks, he's got cement, he's doing it. So a person who just sees them on day one, day two, day five is thinking he's building a wall, right? When he's maybe 2, 3 months down the line, they think, oh, he's built a room. And then what he's actually built is like a chapel, right? Because only he knows what he's building towards. And that's really what founders like you and me do. When we do start off, it just sounds like, what is this guy doing? He had a good job, he engineering. Like me, I was a CA, I was doing private equity before this. And then you get out and you say, no, no, I'm building towards a particular vision, which doesn't seem all too apparent to anybody outside of our extremely close circle or sometimes even outside of our own heads, right? Literally, something big can be done and you're building towards it. People only just know the tactics or the small things that you're taking, but not the longer term strategies, the missions and the visions that you have. And those actually over time start to take shape, and people just sit back and think, "Oh, it's been a year, and like just see how far we've come, right? I mean, unreal sometimes how these things just shape up. But
So
kudos,
true,
man.
man. Yeah,
Seriously,
I
great to
that
hear your
appreciate.
story. I'm sure everybody's going to be, yeah. No, anyway, I mean, it's really, I mean, superb to have you on. Lovely to hear your story. And I'm just hope a lot more people start making better decisions before buying stuff. I know we are doing some really cool collaborations together. The first of amongst them is this podcast. So super excited to kick that off. And so many more things on the plate. So we'll keep informing you guys, our audiences, as to what all we're coming up with. But thanks again, Arjun. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Ketan. Thanks for having me. Exciting to be working with Alpha Coach and seeing how Unbox Health Insights can also help your consumers, your coaches make better choices and make better decisions, right? But yeah, thanks for having me. Had a great time chatting with you, and we'll catch up when I'm in Bombay next.
Likewise. Done, buddy. Done. Cheers. Thank you.